Well, basically, with a lot of comics, it depends on the more expensive ones are usually the more rare comics or the first appearances. I sold this year a first appearance of Spider-Man. We have first appearance of X-Men in stock now. We have other number ones, and they could range depending on condition that we've had between $2,000 and $4,000.
So that would be Amazing Fantasy number 15 is the first appearance of Spider-Man.
That would be the first appearance of Spider-Man.
And what condition was that in when you sold it?
That was probably somewhere around a good plus condition that we sold
So
it.
that's
which is
$3,000 maybe?
Yeah, about that. $3,500 actually is what we sold that one for. Okay. We have other comics that, the cheaper the comic, obviously, the more we sell them. That makes sense. I mean, the average comic that's $3 or $4 is probably the one we sell the highest. When people are collecting back issues or older stuff, that's when they are spending anywhere between $10 and $20 or up to $40 an issue, basically, in there. It takes a more specified collector who's trying to fill holes further back that are probably spending $100 or more per issue.
What sells best in your store?
Comics are still our number one seller. Comics are one. Books or trade paperbacks, which are basically compilations of comics in book form, is our second seller. Toys are like our third. From there, it's a mix of gaming.
Do you see that business sometimes picks up because of movies like Batman and Spider-Man and Superman?
We've seen some increases, basically on certain books and trades that might have to do with the movie or have to do with movies that are coming up. People do come in and, like with the last Batman movie, it's like, do you have the Joker poster? Do you have the statues? Do you have things that go along with the Joker? Because everybody's loved Heath Ledger in that movie, and his demise probably helped that everybody wanted to get that, the Joker merchandise. So they do come in for that. There's a lot of movies, they come in and they buy a little bit, but I think it's more important that the movies actually get into the culture, and then people will know what it is. And by knowing what it is, they're more apt to accept it, to come in to browse and see and buy something.
Sure.
So it's public awareness.
Public awareness, sure. Are you a Marvel or DC fan?
Both. After all these years, I guess, I read both, and I've always read both. I'd have to say, though, my earliest recollection, can't even say it, yes. Recollection, thank you, is probably DC books when I was younger, like House of Mystery, things like that. I remember reading those. I've read almost everything in the mainstream stuff for the most part, and, I read a lot of independents, which is Dark Horse, Image, and some other smaller print companies. Always looking for something that more or less is maybe my fancy, like I like horror, or I like Western. I think a lot of people come in, pick a particular niche that they like. They may like a particular superhero, but then some people like to read crime, some people like to read horror or suspense or mystery. I mean, comics have basically all of that. So you just have to figure out what you like and where you want to go with that, or which particular person or superhero you want to read.
I mean, I'm definitely a comic book reader, but there are people who collect them for money, treat them as stocks. Do you have such customers who come in and look for the rare items to collect for money?
I do, and there are people who will say, I'm here, I want to look for what you have in a high grade or for a book that I should invest in. People always ask me, what should you invest in? I basically always tell them the story that you should collect what you like. But then if they really want to say, look, I want to spend, 3, 4, 5, what should I buy? And then I try to point them still to something what they like, but if not, something that I know might be like in the gold standards you'd probably want to take a look at. You'd want to collect for DC like Superman, Batman, probably the two big ones that people would invest in. Or in Marvel, it might be Spider-Man or early Fantastic Four. So you try to pick those two that are still going to be strong characters down the line. Those are the ones that they would probably should invest in if they're investing, large, more expensive tons of money if they want to just invest.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed something very interesting, that the Bronze Age comics now are selling for a lot of money, 1970s comics. And those even 5 years ago used to buy them for $2 and $3 a piece. Now you're talking about $50 and $60 a piece for certain comics, right? Certain
comics. There's a lot of comics that were sold for $2 and $3 then are selling for $4 and $5 now. It depends on what they are. A lot of the first appearances were stuff in the 70s that people didn't care of. have gone up a lot in price, and I think a lot of that is because growing up through that period and collecting, a lot of that stuff was thrown in boxes for like $1.50, whatever the case it was at that point. Now that more emphasis is on and collectors are trying to find nicer grade copies, it's tough to find nice grade copies, so that drove up the price on that. Plus, I think everybody who comes in, I've been in it long enough now that people will collect what they grew up with.
Yeah.
So basically, you get the people that grew up in the 60s, and the 60s and 50s comics are so expensive now, and also the majority of people who collected those, who grew up with those, have probably afforded what they could or have what they want at this point. They may still nitpick at it, but the next group of people that grew up, like around my age, who grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, through the mid 70s, and now like saying, oh, I used to read Werewolf by Night, I used to read Tomb of Dracula, I used to read, all this stuff from the 70s, so this is what I want to get back, is what I grew up with. I don't care what happened in 1960. It'd be great if I could have the first Fantastic Four, but I could always get a reprint, but that doesn't mean anything to me except that I would have the book.
Right.
But I grew up with the other stuff. So I'm even noticing it now with some people are starting to buy stuff from the 80s. They're starting to come in and going, oh, I only want to start with the McFarlane Spider-Man, or I only want to start some other place in the 80s or the 90s where they grew up with, and they said, I read this as a kid, and they're only in college, so this is where they want to start. So I think it's always goes back to what people are comfortable with, what they read as kids. Or a particular artist, and then they just start with that and they move ahead with that.
Speaking of artists, do you have a book signing here at Harrison's?
We have signings throughout the year. We've had them in the past. We're working on a few things now. We have some companies come in, have come and gone. We're always looking for something different. I got a couple things going on now, but nothing that's concrete, so I can't throw anything out at this point in time. In the past, I had Jim Balin from Tarot. I had Ron Garney, who's doing Marvel right now. I had some other people. I can't remember them right now off the top of my head. But we've had people over the years. I bring them in as I feel I warrant it. It's something I'd probably like to expand upon. But as anything, it costs more money to expand upon that. And I want to make sure that, I've had a few signings that were good, and I've had some signings that weren't so good. And I have yet to quite figure out why, because there's really no fee charge with it. But my feeling is if I'm going to bring somebody in, I really want to make sure that it's worthwhile for them to come in. Whether I pay them or not is inconsequential to me. It's just that I want to make sure that they're going to feel they're appreciated when they come here, and fans will come up to them. So it's something that I'm always battling with, whether it's worth it or not, depending on who I can get.
How do you advertise Harrison's? How do you go about doing that? Well,
we've always, for a long time, we advertised in the Salem Evening News. We did Salem News a little while. Then we did Salem State College for quite a while. We do the Wizard magazine in the back for several years. We do the Overstreet. We do normal phone books, normal web phone books. We do all that. We do conventions locally, so people know us from there, and we advertise there by handing out flyers. I'm probably missing a few things, but pretty much that's what it is. I mean, we try to stick to basically our area, the phone books, the web pages. Diamond Comics, who is our main distributor, also has a comic book locator service that's used a lot of places, where if you go and on their website and punch in a zip code or an area code, zip code basically, it pops up what comic books are in that area. We pay to be in that also. So, and that's national.
Good,
so
great. And last question I have for you is probably classified information here. How do you acquire your back comics?
The back issues, the old stuff. The old stuff we get, basically there's only two ways so you can really acquire those. We've been in business for a long time, so we've bought stuff, and some of the stuff that we got that was marginally old is now more older, obviously, than when we first bought it. We have customers that bring us in collections, which we buy. And we also go to conventions, of which I've bought stuff from other dealers and other collectors. Stuff that I felt that the store should have or didn't have, I'll pay money to get a hold of those, but I may have to pay a dealer more. Sometimes I'll buy out a small dealer, if he's got a small table, and if the stuff fits, I'll buy that. Or if people bring stuff in. So there's different ways that it gets done, but basically there's no other way to do but buy it. So we're always buying it. I mean, I can't... we all are, I think a lot of the other stores are always looking for the older stuff to come in, but it's just, as it gets older and older, it gets harder and harder to come in. So we have to find the roots of, I guess, go out and look for it. And I prefer to buy it from a person or from a dealer. I don't buy anything online. I don't sell anything online. I like the face-to-face part of it, and I don't really trust eBay all that much to buy off of myself either.
Yeah.
So I burnt a couple of times doing small things for myself, so I just don't even bother with it.
Yeah.
So basically, just by buying from customers or from other dealers.
Excellent. Well, Larry Harrison, thank you so much for sharing your views with us. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. Come back anytime. I know you're here at least a couple times a week.
Thank you again.
All right, Pete.